What are you making now, Daddy?
In this video I'm going to be making a fairly simple leather knife sheath to go with the bog oak knife that I made in a previous video. I hope you enjoy it. This is a very condensed and speeded up version of what is quite a long process. I start by making a template out of the ubiquitous cereal packet, and I'm using one of these flexible curves to help me do that. Very useful for this sort of design and projects like this. And I'm using an old existing template I had for a similar knife to give me a starting point. I'm just modifying it slightly. Here I'm marking out the welt. I'm just leaving a little space so that I've got a drain hole in the bottom of the sheath. And just checking the radius on these internal curves. I've marked the template because I'll keep this template just in case I make one that's roughly the same size. I'm using a very sharp knife to cut this leather out now. This is 3.5mm butt leather, really nice quality leather. This is a very sharp knife that I'm using. It's one of my early knife making projects. It's a polar carbon whittler blade with African blackwood and English yellow boxwood handle, and I keep it razor sharp, and I keep it in my craft box, and I use it for all sorts of jobs just like this. And I'm using a punch here, a leather punch, to cut out the internal radii so that I don't have a sharp corner in there. It just gives me a nice round radius. It's very difficult to cut an internal radius using a knife. I'm putting a radius on the end of this belt loop now, and that I do just by nibbling away, gradually rounding it with lots of small cuts. Just neatening it all up. I've marked the centre line. Now I'm cutting out the welt on the template, because I'll need to use that to mark out the welt inside the leather, and also to cut the welt out of some leather. Just marking out the welt using a fine liner pen, then using my sharp knife again, just cutting out the welt. I'm roughing up the skin side of the leather here so that the glue sticks better. This is a V-grooving tool, not a very good one. I'm going to replace this, but it just creates a fold line in the leather, makes it easier to fold. It's quite stiff, this leather. And that's working nicely. Here I'm dry fitting the welt. The welt is what stops the blade of the knife cutting through the stitching, and it also adds some rigidity. This is a stitch groover, and I'm running the groove down here for my stitch line. This does it at a set distance from the edge of the leather. I'm actually doing this on the wrong side, a bit rusty, haven't made one for a while. I'm actually doing this on the back of the sheath rather than the front. It's no big deal because I just punch through and put a groove on the other side, but I prefer really to go from the front. This is a pricking iron. It's a 4-prong pricking iron, and this is what I use to mark out the holes and punch through the leather. I'm just showing you it there. But, you get these from Goods Japan over eBay. They're very good. You overlap each cut or each prick so that you make sure that they're all in line and the same spacing. Make sure you keep it upright so it's perpendicular to the leather. As I get to the curve, I switch to a 2-prong pricking iron just for the curve bit. There we go, all done. You can see it's gone right through. Here I'm just beveling the edge. Beveling the edge of the belt loop using a special tool called an edge beveler. Just running that round. I don't bevel the edges that are going to be glued together, so I'll stop just short of where the welt is. just marking out the welt on the inside of the sheath. This gives me a line with which to glue up to and dye up to. Skiving the belt loop here, this is just thinning it down a bit using the side of the sharp blade. It's called skiving. I'm just thinning it down so it's not so lumpy on the back of the sheath. I'm just roughening the surface that's going to be glued so that the glue takes better. And here I'm punching out the holes for the belt loop. I've punched right through into the leather as well, and I'm just putting a groove on the inside of the sheath to accept the stitches, so it keeps the stitches out of the way of the knife blade as you insert it. Here's my smaller logo stamp, my maker's mark, and I'm just damping the leather down in the area that I'm going to stamp it. Then it's out to the garage with my 1 ton arbor press. I'm just pressing this down into the leather, using quite a lot of force here. Back indoors now to do a bit of gluing. I'm using Evo Stick Time Bond, which is a contact adhesive, and as you can see I've put a little bit of the solvent in the middle of the pot. It forms a little puddle in the middle there. And to start with, I'm painting on virtually just neat solvent. And then I gradually add more and more of the sticky resinous glue and build it up in layers. Doing it this way, it means it really soaks into the surface of the leather and forms a really good bond. And I'm just building it up in layers. Just going in now doing the welt. Doing the same thing, starting off using the puddle of solvent in the middle. I've left it 5 minutes so it's non-tacky to touch. And then press the 2 halves together. Then give it a good whack with a mallet. It's a rubber mallet. Sorry about the camera jumping around everywhere. And that forms a really strong bond. Now cutting out the belt loop using my very sharp knife and a rubber back ruler so it doesn't slip. And just rounding off the ends of the belt loop. Here you can see how the belt loop will fold, and I'm just beveling the edges of the loop using my edge beveler, just running that round all the edges that aren't going to be glued together. Now I'm going to dye the sheath using an oil based dye. This is saddle tan colour, Vibings dye, and doing the inside of the sheath as well so it looks good when you look down inside. Just trying to make sure I don't dye any bits that are going to have glue on them, because it can affect the absorption of the glue. I've turned it over now and I'm dyeing the outside of the sheath using a circular movement with one of these wool daubers for putting the dye on. Doesn't matter if it looks a little bit streaky at this stage, it all gets sorted out in the end. Just missing that bit where the glue's going to go for the belt loop. Just running round, making sure I've done the edges as well, and that's that bit done. And now I'm doing the belt loop, just the same, inside and out, leaving the bits that are going to be glued. I've now got some acrylic Resolene, which is a waterproofing agent, which I'm just putting on the inside of the sheath where I won't be able to proof it later. And this just helps protect the leather if it gets filled with water, but it also helps protect the tool steel or the high carbon steel from corroding if it's up against damp leather, which can cause corrosion of the steel. Resolene is very good, but I don't like it on the outside of sheaths because it makes them look somewhat plasticky. Just putting the sheath in my stitching pony just to stitch up the belt loop. I've put the brass D-ring in. Always remember to put the brass D-ring in, otherwise you've got to undo it all and start again. And I used a 2 needle technique for doing that. Just gluing the 2 halves together now put the glue on a bit too early for this, so I was just livening it up again using a bit of neat solvent on it, just to sort of liven up the glue again so it tacks up. That just glues together very nicely. Make sure it's all squidged down together. I actually left that overnight. Give it a little tap with the mallet. But I'd had enough at this point, so I left it till the next day. And here I'm starting my saddle stitching. Use special saddler's needles for this. They're blunt needles, they've got a nice polished round tip to them. And you thread this thread on and loop it back on itself, putting the needle through the thread, and that locks it on to each end. This thread is Ritzer 25 1mm waxed nylon thread. It's fantastic stuff, but a little bit tricky to get hold of. I'll put the sheath in the stitching pony, and then starting at one end where I've got the double line of holes for strength just at the top through the welt. Make sure I've got even length each side, and I pass the needles through from one side to the other, forming a knot as I go. I'm not great at this, and I was very rusty at this point. I got into the swing of it a bit further on. If you want to see how to do this properly, have a look at Ian Atkinson's channel and Jacklore Knives channel. I'll put links to those in the description. But Sandy at Jacklore Knives, he does a really good job of this sort of sheath, and you can get a lot more information off his channel. He's really good at doing these. You know, I've got a lot of respect for him as a knife maker. Now, I can't really teach you to saddle stitch because I'm no good at it myself. I get by. I'm very rusty, and this is the first bit I've done for a long time. Anyway, essentially I take the lead needle in my right hand, I go through, I lift up like that, pulling it tight, and then I slip the left hand needle through the same hole. Make sure that's free running, that I haven't snagged the needle. I go around that twice to form a knot, and then I pull it tight. I mean, it doesn't really matter how you do it to a degree, you know. I just do this as a hobby, and as long as I do each stitch the same way, it looks good at the end. But there are people who are far better at this, who will show you how to do it on YouTube. There's some really good leather workers. Anyway, here we go. Through, lift the lines up, left hand one through, pull that, make sure it's free, round twice, and pull tight. This produces a very strong stitch. Each stitch is essentially a knot. There we go, round twice, pull through. There we go, through again. Right hand one through, lift up, twice. Here we go. Like I say, I'm not brilliant at it. There are people who are far better at this to show you how to do it, but that's how I do it. There it is, all stitched up. There we are. Done the same saddle stitching on the belt loop, on both parts of the belt loop. And what I'm going to do now is just go out into the workshop and put that on the belt sander on a fine belt, just to neaten that seam up, neaten the welt up, so I'll get it all nice and square. But there you go. I'll bring it back in after I've done that, but I'll just use a very fine belt on the belt sander and just gently rock it to get that nice and square. This is a stitching pony, or goes all by all sorts of different names. You just grip it, you sit on these bits effectively, this bit goes between your legs and it grips. You tighten it up with these, and this is how I hold the leather work while I work on it. This is a homemade one. I made this. It's out of a piece of ash, and it's all adjustable and things. But yeah, there's loads of these around, all different designs, and this works for me. Back in from the workshop now, and I'm using my edge beveler just to take off that edge. Just gives a lovely neat finish. Just running that all the way round, and make sure I run right round the ends as well. And then I dye the welt. And this takes quite a bit of dyeing. You put several coats of this on. Some people use edge coat, which is a special paint for putting on the sides. I just prefer using dye, and I'm burnishing it here, just using a special burnishing tool. And I'm rubbing off the excess dye. Here I'm damping the sheath with some water on a sponge, and I damp this quite a lot. I don't show all of it. I've wrapped the knife up in cling film and painter's tape to protect the handle and the blade. And I push the knife in, and then I'm moulding the leather around the knife handle. You have to press really quite hard, but while the leather's damp it will mould. You need the leather fairly wet. Just be careful not to get fingernails into the leather, because it will easily mark at this stage and you will spoil it. So just make sure you're using the soft parts of your fingers, don't use your nails, and just keep pressing it. Here's the next day, and it's all dry and hard. And then I'm putting some Neatsfoot oil on, or Neatsfoot compound. This helps replenish the leather, because the dyeing and drying and wet forming can make the leather a bit brittle and prone to cracking in the long term, particularly the straps and loops. So you put a little bit of Neatsfoot oil on there. And then to finish off, once that's the Neatsfoot soaked in, I use Aussie leather conditioner, which is a waterproofing agent and polish, and it's fantastic stuff, really good. And this just really protects the leather. All these things do make the leather go a bit darker, but I didn't want it as light as it was anyway, so that's fine. Now I'm preparing the lanyard cord. This is a leather cord, very variable in quality, this stuff. It's a bit of a lottery when you order it. But I'm just dyeing it using the same leather dye that I did the sheath with, just running it through one of my wool daubers. Same again, Neatsfoot compound. I don't know what a neat is, but its feet stink. Just putting that on just to keep this supple, or to make it supple in fact, because this leather cord is quite stiff. Just running that through a cloth, and then the old Aussie leather conditioner again. Just putting that on the lanyard. Just running that through. And then we're going to put the lanyard onto the knife handle. I've polished the knife handle, the blade's all sharp. So I run that through the lanyard hole, and I then do a lanyard knot. I'm no good at demonstrating knots. That's another hobby of mine, knot tying. But sort of over and under and over and under. And you end up with this knot which looks a little bit like a carrot bend. Except the strands are going in at opposite directions and coming out at opposite directions. You then go around the lead straps and up through the middle. And then it's a case of pulling it all tight. Dressing the knot, as you say. Just pulling all the loops through and pulling the loops through and tightening it up and tightening it up until you end up with a nice knot which has almost like this woven look to the side of it. But it takes a little bit of work and a bit of practice, and it's not easy doing it with this leather stuff. A lot easier with something like paracord. Here's a homemade fid or lanyard spike that I made out of a blunt darning needle, and this was in the days before I had a lathe, hence the hand carved handle with some knot work on it. and you put that through the loops and it helps you tighten them up, because you can't really get hold of them with your fingers. Just neatening it down, like I say, dressing the knot. Then I put 2 of my homemade lanyard beads with matching bog oak. That's what they're made of, with brass liners, and then I do another lanyard knot on the end. So the same process. With practice these knots get quite easy. So there we are, there's that carrot bend type arrangement. Then we're going around and up through. And carrying it around, up through the middle. Then I've got to tighten it all down again and dress it. Which, as I say, is a fiddly job. Can make your fingers sore if you're doing a lot of knot work. Hello everyone, my name's Jim Overton. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back. I have just finished the knife project at long last. I've made the sheath for it. There we are. It's out of 3.5mm butt leather. It's been wet moulded to fit the knife. Saddle tan dye, brass D-ring with a dangler style belt loop. It's a fixed one, not a fancy one you clip on and off, it's just fixed. And it's been treated to waterproof it. My logo on there, a little maker's mark. And you can see the welt sewn in. I got a nice finish all along the welt, drain hole at the bottom. And here's the knife, all sharpened up, polished, and I put a lanyard on there with matching bog oak lanyard beads on there, with a couple of lanyard knots, fancy knots, just to make it look nice, one at each end. Really the lanyards helps you pull it in and out of the sheath, but also it means you can slide it over your hand if, say, you were working over water or something like that, you didn't want to drop your knife. But there we are, all done. Very pleased with that. Okay. It's a nice tight fit. It's been wet moulded and all dried and set. It's not going anywhere. Nice and tight. And that's the end of the project. Very satisfying build, that one. Very pleased with that. I've got some more knives to build, and I will do those in due course, some different styles, but we'll do those in due course. I've got some more turning videos coming up. The next video I'll be doing will be on I'll be turning the bowl that will be the prize for my subscriber competition when I reach 5,000 subscribers. I'm almost there, and I'll turn the bowl, hopefully start that tomorrow. There we are, there's the knife. I'll post some stills of that in a minute. Thank you very much to all my subscribers and all the lovely comments. I really appreciate it. When I started doing YouTube, I never expected the support I've got, and I'm absolutely blown away by it. It really is lovely. And I've got lots more videos coming soon. I hope you like what I do. If you haven't subscribed already, please do, and please share and like, that helps. And I'll see you all back soon. Bye bye. As I said earlier, I'll put some links in the description to some other knife makers and leather workers who I enjoy watching work. But I will be doing some different style sheaths coming up in the future. Thanks for watching. More videos coming soon.
coming soon.